The Jay-Z and Tony Buzbee war continues in Jay-Z's extortion case that he filed against Tony Buzbee. They had a court hearing today on Tony Buzbee's motion to throw out Jay-Z's extortion claims. In the prior court hearings, the judge told Jay-Z that he was getting ready to throw out his extortion claims against Tony Buzbee unless Jay-Z brought in evidence that Tony Buzbee was trying to extort him. And not long after this, Jay-Z would submit affidavits from the private investigators that went and questioned that Jane Doe. Honestly, this court hearing was kind of crazy because it's looking like the extortion claims against Tony Buzbee might be moving forward, but the judge also called out Jay-Z for using private investigators. Now, this reporter, Megan Kuneff, was in the room during this court hearing, but I will tell you, it does seem like some things were missed that she was tweeting out in this court hearing because some of it is missing some context. Jay-Z's lawyer from Quinn Emanuel said nobody at my firm hired these investigators, and nobody knew that they were being hired. Mr. Carter is free if he wanted to knock on that door or hire an investigator. That is not an ethical violation in California. Now, Jay-Z had recently filed a motion that he wanted this Jane Doe and Tony Buzbee deposed because of this conversation that she gave with this private investigator and him thinking that Tony Buzbee extorted him. The judge would then say that he didn't want this Jane Doe deposed for the purpose of this motion. And this is what I say about a lack of context because this was never said in what she reported, but she says that Jay-Z's lawyer then said that he misspoke earlier when he said Roc Nation hired investigators who spoke to Jane Doe at her home in Alabama. But Jay-Z's lawyer went on to say it was somebody who worked for Mr. Carter, somebody who was his assistant decided to do this. The judge then responds that Jay-Z's fingerprints are all over this, whether he knew or not. And then Jay-Z's lawyer said that he was wanting to make sure that somebody in the back of the room heard this. But this is pretty crazy because then we have the judge cussing and then he corrected himself to say darn it while he was looking at his calendar trying to find a good day for Jay-Z and Buzbee's lawyers to come back and continue arguing on this manner. The judge then said that he wanted Jay-Z and Tony Buzbee's lawyer to come back for these oral arguments on April 7th because he hasn't yet came to a decision. He did issue a tentative order, which means it's showing you which way the judge is leaning. In the judge's tentative order, he said the new evidence presented by Jay-Z's lawyer salvaged the extortion claims against Tony Buzbee over the dismissed Jane Doe lawsuit. What he's basically saying, this is not my final order, but this is what I'm thinking so far after everything that I've heard, that I would probably let the extortion claims go forward in a court of law based off all the evidence that Jay-Z submitted from these private investigators. The only thing about Los Angeles Superior Court, sometimes they don't even drop the tentative ruling, but this reporter that was in the room did get a copy of the tentative ruling. The judge wrote, for Jay-Z, the one private investigator named Pillinger declarations are inappropriate. A declaration based on public information and the internet will not be admissible even under the Sweetwater law. And this was the private investigator that didn't go question her physically, but he was looking up all of her information on the internet, looking up her criminal record, looking up her mental health issues, and more. The judge said that the declaration ought to be as close as admissible in court as possible, and this just doesn't cut it. He said this declaration holds no weight and certain private facts about Jane Doe would not be enough to warrant a finding of actual malice, even assuming that Tony Buzbee could reasonably have found it by looking. And the judge starts calling Jay-Z out. He said, and for all that Jay-Z speaks of simply using the evidence to show minimal merit for the extortion case to continue, that rings hollow in the light of the way he has attacked the Jane Doe's credibility. And he said that Jay-Z basically put in this declaration from this private investigator to basically destroy the Jane Doe's credibility for the press and not for this court. Now the judge starts going in a little bit on Tony Buzbee. He says, as for Buzbee, Buzbee well knows that counter declarations are of little or no value in this context. All competing declarations tend to do is emphasize that there is a factual dispute as noted above, and this is what happened here. And what he's talking about is the declaration put in by the Jane Doe saying that I was harassed by these private investigators. And the judge said that the counter evidence seems like it's more for the press than for the court. Then the judge goes back to Jay-Z again and said the orders concerning Buzbee's pro hac vice status in New York is not valuable here. And this is because Jay-Z's lawyers put in a motion just recently saying, hey, look, Tony Buzbee wasn't even properly registered in the Southern District of New York for all 15 cases that he just dismissed himself from. And the judge is basically saying this has nothing to do with this case, so you are just adding it just to do it. He says the court fails to even see the relevance to the legal question the court must now decide. Again, the court must believe that the documents were filed for an audience different than the court. So the judge is basically taking shots at not only Jay-Z, but also Tony Buzbee and saying some of the things that they are doing is only basically for the press, not even for this court decision. Now, from what it seems like to me, they really didn't get enough time to argue, but the judge put in his tentative ruling, which is not a final ruling, it's just which way he's leaning, based on everything that they have filed in these motions. But the judge wants them to come back on April 7th and continue this argument because he wants to hear more before he offers a final decision on if the case for extortion will move forward. So yes, the war between Tony Buzbee and Jay-Z is nowhere near over, but y'all let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments.